I used to think we were living the dream. That's how I'd describe it when people asked how life was treating us. Can't complain, I'd say, probably with a beer in hand and the Pacific breeze cutting through the heat. We had the house, not huge, but close enough to the beach that you could hear the waves if the windows were open. We had 2 kids, a dog, a minivan with sand always stuck in the floor mats. It was, the California life you see in those family vacation brochures, where everyone's smiling and sun-kissed. And my wife, Emily, she was the center of it all. We met back in college, some party where I was way too drunk to be as charming as she seemed to think I was. I don't know what she saw in me back then, but somehow we made it work. Got married a couple years later, had our son Tyler, then our daughter, Maddie. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. At least, that's what I thought. There's something about living near the ocean, especially if you're not from here originally. It pulls you in. The light, the air, it's like you're living in some permanent vacation, even if your days are filled with work, bills, and whatever the kids are into that month. We'd take walks on the beach, just as sometimes if my mom could watch the kids. And on those evenings, with the sun turning the water gold and the sound of the waves filling the silence between us, I honestly believed we were happy. I didn't know back then that every time we walked that stretch of sand, we were passing the spot where she first met him. It's funny how the big moments in your life, the ones that end up changing everything, they don't announce themselves. There's no flashing sign or dramatic music to warn you. If you're lucky, maybe you'll get a weird feeling, a little tug in your gut that says something's off. But I never got that. Not once. Because the day Emily met him, I was home with a sick kid, thinking she was just out clearing her head after a long week. That was 5 years before I found out. 5 whole years. When you say it like that, it sounds impossible. Like how could I not know for that long? How do you live with someone, sleep next to them, raise kids together, and miss something that huge? Trust me, I've asked myself that question more times than I can count. I've sat awake at night, staring at the ceiling, retracing every conversation, every fight, every quiet moment we shared, trying to spot the cracks. But the truth is, I didn't see them because I wasn't looking. I believed her. I believed in us. I didn't know there was another man's shadow hanging over every single one of those years. Looking back, I guess there were signs. There always are, right? But when you're living your life, you don't always connect the dots. Especially when you trust someone. Emily loved the beach. That wasn't new. We moved to California partly because of her obsession with the ocean, the sound of it, the way the sand felt between her toes. She always said it made her feel small in the best way, like all the noise in her head got quieter when she was standing at the edge of something so big. I used to love that about her. But after that day, the day she met him, even though I didn't know it at the time, something shifted. She started going to the beach alone more often. At first, it made sense. The kids were getting older, a little easier to leave with me for an hour or two. She told me the walks helped her clear her head, and I believed her. Hell, I encouraged it. Take time for yourself, I'd say, thinking I was being a supportive husband. Sometimes she'd come home with this faraway look, like she'd been somewhere else entirely. I thought it was just life. Maybe motherhood wearing her down, maybe a little garden variety midlife weirdness. We were both in our late 30s, starting to feel the years creep up, and I figured she was processing that in her own way. I never asked questions. That's the part that still eats at me. I never asked? Not when her phone started having a password, not when she started staying out just a little longer each time. I didn't think I needed to. We were solid. Or so I thought. The funny thing is, it wasn't even like our marriage got bad. We didn't fight any more than usual. We had our arguments, money, the kids, the usual stuff, but nothing that made me think she was looking for something outside of us. If anything, she seemed more affectionate sometimes, like she was making up for something I couldn't see. It was the little things I brushed off. The sudden need to get back in shape, even though I thought she looked perfect the way she was. The way she glanced at her phone and smiled that tiny, secret smile before slipping it back into her pocket. The trips to run errands, that took just a little longer than they used to. I could explain it all away. And I did. I was comfortable. And I guess that's the dangerous part. When you're comfortable, you stop seeing things clearly. You trust the life you've built, and you assume your partner's just as invested in it as you are. For 5 years, she carried that secret. 5 years of family dinners, birthday parties, school plays, all of it with me standing right there beside her. And somewhere out there, walking the same stretch of sand, was this man I didn't know existed. He knew my wife. And I didn't know a damn thing. I used to think about him in the abstract. The other man. Like some shadowy figure lurking in the background of other people's marriages, not mine. Affairs happened in bad marriages, in those glossy tabloid stories or in movies where the husband was a total bastard and the wife was starved for affection. Not in my house. Not with Emily. But there was a man, and he was very real. I didn't know his name at first. I didn't know his face or how they met. That all came later, after the dam broke. But the way I pictured it, and maybe this is just how my brain tried to make sense of it, I imagined him the same way every time. Some tan, beach bum type, probably younger than me, someone with no responsibilities, no mortgage, no stretch marks or bills to split. Just some guy who could show up with nothing but a smile and a surfboard, say all the right things, and disappear back into the waves. That wasn't exactly right, but it wasn't too far off either. From what she eventually told me, not all at once, mind you, because it took months to get the whole story, it started so simple it made me sick. She was walking alone, like she always did, needing space after a fight we had about something stupid. The dishwasher, I think. And there he was, just a guy sitting in the sand, watching the sunset. He said something cheesy, something about how the light made her hair glow. She laughed, told him she was married. That should have been the end of it. But he wasn't pushy. He was easygoing, funny, said he lived nearby and came to the beach to clear his head too. They ended up talking, just talking, until the sun disappeared and the sky went dark. She went home, crawled into bed beside me, and I never knew a thing. That was the first time. There's something about the beach, I guess. It's like the ocean gave her permission to be someone else, to leave behind the version of herself that was a wife, a mom, a woman weighed down by years of routine. I don't think she went looking for anything, but once that door opened, she didn't close it either. They kept running into each other, or so she claimed, and every time, the conversations got a little longer, a little deeper. It was innocent, until it wasn't. I can't tell you exactly when it crossed the line. She couldn't even tell me, not really. There was no dramatic moment, no whirlwind romance. Just a slow drift. A kiss after months of talking. A night at his place when she told me she was out with friends. Then another. Then too many to count. The hardest part to stomach, at least for me, was how normal everything seemed at home. She still kissed me goodnight. We still took the kids to soccer games and birthday parties. We still made love, even though now I know her mind was probably somewhere else half the time. 5 years. That's what I keep coming back to. 5 years of smiling at me with that secret sitting behind her eyes. And I was too blind, or too trusting, to see it. You ever hear people talk about ghosts in old houses? That feeling like someone's there, even if you can't see them? That's what my marriage was, only I didn't know it at the time. For 5 years, I lived with Emily and a ghost. Not some shadow in the hallway, but a man I'd never met. A man who knew my wife's body almost as well as I did, knew how she laughed when she wasn't trying to be polite, knew the secrets she stopped sharing with me because they were meant for someone else now. And the part that twists the knife? I didn't hate her. I should have. When the truth came out, I should have screamed and broken something and stormed out like the guys in the movies. But I didn't. I just stood there, numb, like my whole body forgot how to feel anything. It didn't come out in some dramatic confession either. No screaming match, no private investigator dropping a folder on my kitchen table. It unraveled piece by piece, slow and cruel, like a leak in the ceiling that only shows itself after the whole roof's rotted through. It started with her phone. She left it on the counter one night, something she never used to do. I wasn't looking for anything. Honestly, the idea of Emily cheating had never crossed my mind. But a text popped up. Not a name I recognized, just a number. And it wasn't the words that got me, it was the tone. Too familiar. Too intimate, even though it wasn't anything explicit. Something about the way it said, "Can't stop thinking about that night." That was the crack in the dam. I didn't confront her right away. I told myself it was probably nothing. A misunderstanding. A weird spam text. All the excuses you make when you don't want your whole life to blow up. But something in me, maybe that little whisper I'd been ignoring for years, told me to dig. I wish I hadn't. I scrolled back through her messages, and there it was. 5 years of late-night conversations, inside jokes I wasn't part of, little pieces of my wife that she gave to someone else while I was sitting in the same house, thinking we were solid. When I finally asked her about it, she didn't deny it. She didn't even cry, at least not at first. She just sat down at the kitchen table, staring at her hands like they belonged to someone else. And then she said it, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "It's not what you think." That's the line, isn't it? The one they always use. But it was exactly what I thought, and worse. Because it wasn't some one-night mistake. It wasn't a midlife crisis fling she regretted the second it was over. It was years. 5 years of a double life, a second relationship she balanced alongside our marriage like it was no big deal. And the kicker? She said she loved us both. I stood there in the kitchen, her words still hanging in the air. "I love you both." What the hell does that even mean? I think that's when the anger finally started to break through the numbness. Not the shouting, plate-smashing kind of anger. It was quieter, heavier. Like a weight settling on my chest, making it harder to breathe. I wanted to ask her a million things at once. How could you? When did it start? Do I even know who you are? But nothing came out. I just sat down across from her at that same table where we'd eaten countless family dinners, helped the kids with their homework, planned vacations we could barely afford. The table where we built a life. And now it was the place where my marriage started dying. Emily kept talking, not fast, not defensive, just talking. Like she was peeling back the layers of something that had been festering inside her for so long, she'd almost gotten used to the smell. She told me about the man. His name was Nate. Just a regular guy, not some beach Adonis like I'd imagined. A divorced dad with a teenage daughter, living in a rented house a few blocks from the water. No big career, no flashy life, just a guy who happened to be in the right place at the right time when my wife was lonely and angry enough to let her guard down. She said it wasn't planned? That part I believe. But the rest of it? She said it just happened. That's the part one can't swallow. Affairs don't just happen. You make a choice. And then another. And another. Until one day you're 5 years deep into a double life, sitting across from your husband at the kitchen table, saying you love two people at once like that's a thing anyone's supposed to understand. I asked her why. And you know what she said? "I don't know." That broke something in me. Because if she told me she was miserable, if she'd said I was cold, or cruel, or inattentive, at least then I could have told myself I had a part in it. But she didn't. She said she loved me. That I was a good husband, a good father. But somehow, it still wasn't enough. That's the part no one prepares you for, realizing your best wasn't enough. That you can love someone, build a life with them, do everything right, and still end up here. Sitting at a table, watching the person you trusted most in the world try to explain why she needed someone else to feel whole. I don't remember how the conversation ended that night. I just remember walking outside, standing in the driveway, and staring up at the stars. The same sky we used to lay under when we were young and broke and thought love was all we'd ever need. I stood there for a long time, long enough for the night to turn cold. And all I kept thinking was, what the hell do I do now? The weirdest part about finding out your wife's been cheating for half a decade is how quiet everything gets. You'd think it would be loud, screaming, doors slamming, dramatic speeches, But it wasn't like that. Not for me. The house felt hollow, like the air itself had been sucked out, leaving only the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. The kids were asleep upstairs when I found out. That part made me feel like a fraud, tucking them in, kissing their foreheads like everything was fine, when inside, I felt like a grenade that just hadn't gone off yet. Emily and I didn't sleep in the same bed that night. I couldn't. I laid down on the couch, not that I got much sleep. Every time I closed my eyes I saw them. Not just the obvious, their bodies tangled up in some sun-drenched bedroom, but the other stuff. The walks on the beach, the text messages that made her smile, the inside jokes they probably had. It's the intimacy that breaks you, not the sex. In the morning, we didn't fight. We didn't even really talk. She made coffee, I poured cereal for the kids, and we moved through the motions of being a family like we were actors who forgot their lines. I thought I'd want answers, every detail, every lie, every timeline. But the truth is, you can't handle all of it at once. It's too big. Too ugly. So you take it in pieces, like chipping away at something you're not even sure you want to fully see. Over the next few days, the truth came out in layers. It wasn't every day, every week, it wasn't even constant. There were stretches of time when it was just texts, just talking, just this weird emotional safety net she kept in her pocket. And then there were the times it wasn't. Hotels. His house. The back seat of her car parked near the beach, where the waves could drown out the sound of her betrayal. She said she thought about ending it 100 times. That she would look at me, at the kids, at our life, and tell herself, this is enough. But somehow, it never stuck. And I guess that's what hurt the most, knowing she had a choice, over and over again, and every single time, she chose him. I didn't know how to be in my own house after that. Every room felt like a crime scene, every memory tainted. The couch where we watched movies, had she texted him from there? The bedroom where we made love, was her mind somewhere else the whole time? There was no handbook for this. No. So your wife had a 5-year affair. Died to walk me through the next steps. All I knew was that I couldn't breathe with her so close, but the thought of blowing up our family felt even worse. And the kids, God, the kids. How do you shatter their world without them even knowing it's coming? I was stuck. And the worst part? I still loved her. Loving someone after they've betrayed you feels like holding on to a broken glass. You know it's hurting you, but you can't seem to let go. That's what those first few weeks felt like. Emily and I didn't tell anyone. Not friends, not family. It was just this horrible secret hanging between us, poisoning every interaction. We'd pass each other in the hallway, brushing shoulders like strangers, but still putting on the show for the kids. I felt like I was living with someone I didn't know. She wasn't the woman I married. Or maybe, and this is the part that really messes with your head, maybe she was and I'd just never really known her at all. She tried, in her way, to patch things up. She'd ask if I wanted to talk, if there was anything she could do. But what do you even say to that? Yeah, actually, could you go back in time and not screw some guy while I was home giving the kids a bath? There's no answer that fits. The worst times were the quiet moments, when life slowed down just enough for my mind to start replaying everything. Dinners at the table, vacations, the way she used to laugh at my dumb jokes, all of it felt fake now. Like I was remembering scenes from someone else's life. I wanted to leave. I thought about it constantly. Packing a bag, telling the kids I'd be back in a few days, driving until the Pacific disappeared in the rearview mirror. But I didn't. Because of them. Tyler was 9, Maddie was 6. They still crawled into bed with us after bad dreams. They still thought their parents were a team, that mom and dad would always be there, together, no matter what. How do you take that away from them? How do you look at their little faces and say, sorry kids, everything you believed about love was a lie. So I stayed. At least for a while. The days blurred into weeks, and Emily, she changed. Not in the way you'd expect, like someone desperate to fix what they'd broken. It was quieter than that. She shrank into herself, Like she wasn't sure what role she was supposed to play anymore: wife, mother, betrayer. We tried counseling. One of those beach town therapists with seashells on her desk and calming ocean sounds playing in the background. Emily cried in the sessions, which almost made me angrier. She was supposed to be the strong one. The one who chose this. I was the one bleeding out. Why was she the one falling apart? The therapist asked me what I needed to forgive her. I didn't have an answer. Because how do you forgive something that rewrites your whole marriage? How do you look at someone who held your face in their hands and promised to love only you, and know they broke that promise over and over, and still want to believe them? I wanted to hate her. God, I wanted to. But I didn't. And that scared me more than anything. The funny thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just live in the past, it rewrites the present. Every conversation, every touch, every memory becomes something you have to question. Was she already sleeping with him when we took the kids camping in Big Sur? Was she texting him under the table during family dinners? Did she ever look at me during sex and wish I was someone else? I couldn't turn it off. I couldn't shut my mind up long enough to feel anything other than that gnawing, stomach-turning mix of anger and grief. That was my new reality. But the world didn't stop. Bills still showed up. The kids still needed lunches packed and rides to school. My boss still expected me to show up to work like my life wasn't falling apart. And Emily, she didn't disappear either. She was still there every morning, making coffee, feeding the dog, folding laundry. It felt like we were playing house in a burned-down building. The only thing we could agree on, without words really, was that the kids couldn't know. That was the hill we both planted our flags on. Tyler and Maddie would have the childhood we promised them, even if it meant pretending we were fine when we were anything but. So we faked it. We sat next to each other at soccer games, her knee brushing mine, and I'd wonder if those same hands clapping for our son had once held Nate's face. We smiled for birthday pictures, standing side by side, our arms around each other's waists, and all I could think about was how many lies were tucked into those smiles. There's a unique kind of hell in that, knowing the life you're presenting to the world is a lie, but feeling too afraid to blow it up. Some nights, I slept in the guest room. Some nights, I stayed out late, driving nowhere with the windows down, just to be alone with the kind of silence that didn't exist in our house anymore. And some nights, when the weight of it all got too heavy, I'd come back to our bed, and Emily would curl up beside me like nothing had happened. Like we were still us. And I let her. Not because I forgave her, I didn't. Not because I wanted to pretend it hadn't happened, I couldn't. I let her because the alternative felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, one gust of wind away from falling into a life I didn't recognize. That's what affairs really steal from you, not just trust, not just intimacy, but the sense of solid ground under your feet. You start questioning everything. Did I ever really know her? Was our marriage always this fragile? Was there something wrong with me that I couldn't see? She told me she ended it with Nate the night I found the texts. Said she sent him a message, told him it was over, and blocked his number. I didn't believe her. I wanted to, but 5 years of secrets don't vanish with a single text. Still, I didn't check her phone again. Not because I trusted her, that ship had sailed, but because I wasn't sure I could survive seeing something else. I was hanging on by my fingernails, and I knew it. We tried to move forward. That's what you tell yourself, that you're moving forward. But really it felt like dragging a corpse through our days, the rotting weight of everything unsaid and undone between us. Every time I looked at her, I saw both the woman I married and the woman who betrayed me. They lived in the same body, wore the same face, but they weren't the same person. I think that's what hurt the most. She wasn't just my wife. She was the mother of my kids. My best friend. My partner in everything. And she was the woman who smiled into another man's pillow, who held his secrets alongside ours, who lived 2 lives so seamlessly I never saw the cracks. How do you stay married to someone like that? How do you leave someone like that? I was stuck between 2 impossible choices, and every day I waited to feel sure about one of them. That day never came. Instead, life just went on. The waves still hit the shore. The kids still needed help with homework. The garbage still went out every Thursday. And Emily and I kept pretending we were fine. Because sometimes, the prison you build together feels safer than the freedom you can't face alone. You can't live in that kind of limbo forever. That's something they don't tell you, how pretending becomes its own kind of poison. It seeps into everything, even the good moments. Every laugh, every kiss on the forehead, every quiet night on the couch, they all felt fake because underneath, there was this thick layer of rot neither of us could scrape off. At first, I thought I could live with it. That I could compartmentalize it the way she had for 5 years, put the betrayal in a box, tuck it away, and go through the motions for the sake of the kids, the house, the life we built. I even convinced myself it was working for a while. But the thing about pain is that it doesn't just sit quietly in the corner. It spreads. It changes the way you see everything. I couldn't look at her without wondering if she was thinking about him. If she ever compared us, my hands, my body, my words, to his. I'd catch her in these quiet moments, just folding laundry or watching TV, and I'd wonder where her mind had gone. Was she replaying some sunset walk with him? Was she thinking about all the things she couldn't say out loud? The weight of it all became unbearable. It wasn't one big fight that ended it. No screaming match, no dramatic exit. It was 1,000 small moments, moments where I realized I wasn't healing. I was just hiding. There was one night, though. We were sitting in the backyard after the kids were asleep, drinking wine like we used to, back when the world felt simpler. The air was warm, and the sound of the ocean carried up the hill to our house. It should have felt peaceful, but all I could hear was this constant buzzing in my head, ask her, ask her, ask her. So I did. Do you miss him? She froze, her glass halfway to her lips. And in that silence, I already knew the answer. She could have lied. I almost wished she had. But instead, she set the glass down, looked at me with those eyes I used to know so well, and said sometimes. That was it. That was the breaking point. Because you can work through a lot of things, anger, grief, even betrayal, but you can't work through sometimes. That meant part of her was still with him, still wandering those beaches in her mind, still craving something I'd never be. And that's when I knew. I wasn't going to be the man who spent the rest of his life fighting a ghost. The next morning I told her. Quietly, over coffee, because after everything, I didn't have the energy for another dramatic scene. I can't do this. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just nodded, tears already slipping down her face, because I think we both knew this was coming. We'd been living on borrowed time since the night I found her messages, and we both knew it. We told the kids together a week later. That was the part that broke me, watching their faces crumple, knowing that no matter how much we said it wasn't their fault, they'd still wonder. We sold the house. The one near the beach. The one where I thought we were happy. The one where she snuck off to be with him while I helped with math homework or grilled burgers out back. She moved into a smaller place across town, and I rented a little apartment closer to work. The kids split their time between us, and we smiled through handoffs at soccer games and school events. We became one of those divorced couples who looked friendly enough on the surface, like we were just two people who drifted apart instead of two people who broke each other in ways no one could see. It's been 2 years since we split. I'd like to tell you I'm fine. That I've moved on. That I don't think about her, about them, about the years I can't get back. But the truth is, healing's messy. Some days I'm okay. Some days I'm still that guy sitting in the driveway, staring at the stars, wondering how the hell I missed it all. I don't hate her. I don't love her either. What I feel now is something quieter, like remembering a song you used to love that you can't listen to anymore because it belongs to someone you don't recognize. And the beach? I don't go there much these days. But when I do, I walk alone. It's funny how much time you spend looking back after something like this. Not just at the marriage, but at yourself. Who you were. Who you became. Who you are now, standing on the other side of it. The truth is, when it all first blew up, I wanted answers. I wanted to know every text, every kiss, every time they met up. I wanted to dissect it like an autopsy, figure out exactly where my marriage died. But the further I got from it, the more I realized something that took me by surprise. The details didn't matter. Not really. What mattered was the weight of it all, the slow, grinding weight of being lied to by the person you built your life with. It wasn't the sex. It wasn't even the love she said she felt for him. It was the fact that she woke up next to me every morning, made my coffee, kissed my forehead, and carried that secret inside her chest like it was no big deal. That's what broke me. And I've spent a long time, 2 years and counting, trying to figure out if that was about her, or if it was about me. About the kind of trust one gave too easily. About the kind of husband I thought I was. About the version of marriage I had in my head that never really existed. You tell yourself a story when you're married. A story about partnership, about loyalty, about how the two of you are different from everyone else. That no matter how hard it gets, you'll always choose each other. And when that story shatters, you're left with 2 choices: drown in the wreckage, or learn how to swim. I'm still swimming. I've dated a little since the divorce, nothing serious. It's hard to let someone in when you've learned firsthand how easy it is for someone you love to lie to your face. But I'm trying. That's all you can do, right? Keep showing up, even with the bruises. The kids, they're okay, I think. Kids are more resilient than we give them credit for. They still get 2 Christmases, 2 birthday parties, 2 sets of parents who love them, even if those parents couldn't love each other the way they should have. As for Emily, we're civil. Friendly even on the good days. I don't hate her. I think there was a time I did, but hate's just another kind of tether, and I wanted to cut all of those. I think she regrets it, the affair, the lying, the way it all ended. I think she looks at me sometimes, across the soccer field or at school pickup, and remembers the way we used to be. The way we could have been, if she'd made different choices. But regrets her burden, not mine. My burden is different. It's learning to trust my own gut again. To believe in love again, even after seeing how fragile it really is. I still go to the beach sometimes. Not the same stretch where it all started. That place feels haunted, like some graveyard where the version of me who believed in forever is buried. But there's another spot, further north, where the cliffs are higher and the wind stings your face just a little bit more. I stand there and I let myself feel it all, the grief, the anger, the hope, even the weird gratitude. Because the thing about rock bottom is, once you hit it, you know exactly how strong you are when you decide to stand back up. I'm not who I was before all this. But maybe, just maybe, I'm someone better. And that's enough for now. The end.